What if the greatest pop star in history spent his entire life chasing a love he could never have? Not fame, not fortune, but one woman, one name. Diana Ross. To the world, she was his mentor, his fairy godmother, his muse. But behind closed doors, she was something else entirely. Michael Jackson didn't just admire Diana Ross, he worshipped her, called her mother, lover, friend. Sometimes in the same breath, he built shrines to her, proposed to her, wrote revenge songs when she broke his heart. And through it all, she remained just out of reach, close enough to touch, but never his to hold. This wasn't just a friendship, it was a decades-long obsession, fueled by passion, betrayal, jealousy, and the kind of secrets that never made it into the tabloids. But what was it really? A pure connection? A tragic fantasy? Or something far more complicated? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will change the way you see both Michael Jackson and Diana Ross forever. In 1969, Michael Jackson was just a shy, bright-eyed boy from Gary, Indiana, thrust into the spotlight with his brothers as part of the Jackson 5. But the moment he met Diana Ross, something inside him shifted. This wasn't just starstruck admiration. It was instant gravity. Like he'd found the center of his universe, and it wore lashes, diamonds, and a crown of poise. Berry Gordy, the mastermind behind Motown, saw Michael's raw power and potential. But he also saw a marketing opportunity. So he spun a story, told the world that Diana Ross had discovered the Jackson 5, that she was the one who found them and brought them to Motown. It wasn't true, but it was brilliant, because it cemented Diana as the fairy godmother of Michael's rise. And Michael? He believed in the magic. Soon after, Diana invited the young Jackson boys to live with her. But Michael, just 11 at the time, was the one who stayed. He moved into her home, ate at her table, slept under her roof, and for nearly a year, he lived in a dream that looked like Beverly Hills but felt like destiny. He didn't just idolize her, he absorbed her. Her walk, her voice, her elegance. She was the embodiment of everything he wanted to become, and everything he felt he could never be without her. He called her Mama in public, but behind the scenes, he joked that she was his girlfriend. To him, it wasn't a contradiction. It was the only way he knew how to explain how deeply she lived in his heart. Even his own mother noticed the shift. Katherine Jackson later wrote that Michael would tease his sisters, telling them they weren't truly beautiful unless they looked like Diana. It wasn't a compliment, it was a declaration of who held the blueprint to his soul. And while the world saw Michael rising into superstardom, what they didn't see was a boy falling. Not into fame, but into a love so complex it would blur the lines between fantasy, family, and forever. Because from the moment he entered her world, Michael Jackson wasn't just trying to become the king of pop. He was trying to become the kind of man Diana Ross could love. And that's where the story truly begins. Michael Jackson had a lot of people in his orbit, managers, family, fans screaming his name from every corner of the world. But Diana Ross, she wasn't orbiting. She was the sun. But this wasn't your typical mentor-protege story. It was something far more tangled and far more dangerous. To Michael, Diana wasn't just a guiding light. She was a mirror, a muse, and maybe, just maybe, the one true love he couldn't name out loud. His feelings for her hovered in that gray space between childhood hero worship and adult longing. And as he got older, that line only blurred more. And just when you think their relationship couldn't get more complicated, Michael crossed it in the most unexpected way. There are whispers, loud ones, that Michael proposed to Diana not once, but twice. Both times, she gently said no. The official reasons? Their 14-year age gap, the fear it would ruin her image, the discomfort it might bring in a world that already scrutinized every move a black superstar made. But behind the polished smiles and public denials, the heartbreak was real. Even after her refusals, Michael never wavered. He carried that love like a torch through the darkest moments of his life. She was his North Star, his blueprint for beauty, elegance, and success. And whether he was calling her mother to the press or proposing behind closed doors, the truth lived somewhere in between. And Diana? She knew exactly what he felt, but she also knew the price of accepting it. She never encouraged him publicly, but she never cut him off either. She played the role perfectly, supportive, affectionate, teasing just enough to keep him close, but distant enough to never cross the point of no return. It was a balance only she could maintain. And Michael? He accepted the crumbs, because even crumbs from Diana Ross were more sacred to him than a feast from anyone else. But the deeper Michael fell, the harder it became to pretend it wasn't real. In every stage move, every costume, every soft spoken interview, there was a piece of Diana in him. She didn't just inspire him, she became part of him. And what came next would take that devotion to a whole new level of obsession. By the early 1980s, Michael Jackson wasn't just famous, he was untouchable. Thriller shattered every record, turning him into a cultural phenomenon. But behind the sequins and sold out stadiums, the only person he still craved approval from was Diana Ross. But as his legend grew, so did the emotional distance between them. When Michael moonwalked for the first time during a live broadcast in 1983, the world lost its mind. That single move wasn't just a dance step, it was an announcement. He had arrived. But privately, that performance was laced with longing. The elegance, the timing, the flair, every detail had Diana's fingerprints on it. He had studied her, copied her grace, and used it to build his kingdom. And yet, no amount of applause could silence what he still hadn't received: her love. As his fame soared, Michael retreated inward. He became a master of the spotlight, but a ghost outside of it. He would rent entire grocery stores just to feel what normal life might look like. His team would stage fake shoppers and clerks, just so he could experience what it was like to buy cereal without screaming fans. And if that sounds heartbreaking, it's because it was. With Neverland Ranch, Michael tried to build something pure, a magical world that erased the trauma of his past, a place where childhood could finally begin. Amusement rides, animals, movie theaters. It was a dreamland built by someone who never really got to dream. But even in Neverland, one room was different from the rest. Michael created a shrine to Diana Ross. Not a fan wall, a literal shrine, covered in portraits, lit by thousands of candles that burned day and night. He once said that a spiritual advisor told him if he surrounded a loved one's image with light, they'd never leave him. So that's exactly what he did. But what kind of love needs to be kept alive with fire? Even as the world began to speculate about Michael's changing appearance, his skin tone, surgeries, masks, he stayed silent. The media mocked him, called him a freak, a recluse, a tragedy in real time. But what they never understood was that the real transformation had nothing to do with skin or scalpels. It had everything to do with who he was trying to become, for her. And what he sacrificed to get there would leave scars no surgery could hide. Because as Michael Jackson built his empire, piece by piece, one woman remained etched into the foundation. Diana Ross wasn't just part of his story, she was the reason he kept writing it. And soon, their next encounter would blur the lines between rumor and revelation. In 1977, long before the world crowned him the king of pop, Michael Jackson stepped into one of the most pivotal roles of his young career, the Scarecrow in The Wiz. It was a major milestone, a black reimagining of The Wizard of Oz, filmed in New York City. But for Michael, it wasn't just a movie. Because on that set, Diana Ross was right beside him. She played Dorothy, elegant, radiant, and every bit the goddess he still adored. Michael was 19, on the edge of manhood, but still clinging to that childlike devotion for her. The long days on set brought them closer. The long nights, that's where the rumors began. And then came that night, the one people still whisper about in industry circles. One evening, Diana went to visit Michael at his apartment, harmless by most accounts. But morning came, and she hadn't left. Assistants started calling. Concerned friends asked questions. And when someone finally got through, Diana was still there. What happened behind that closed door has never been confirmed. But what happened next only deepened the mystery. On set the next day, Diana laughed and made a comment that sent shockwaves through the crew. It wasn't just a joke, it was a statement, a deliberately placed rumor that raised more questions than it answered. And Michael? He didn't deny it. When asked about that night, he just smiled and said, "You'd have to ask Diana." When Diana was asked, she laughed and tossed it right back. Ask Michael. They didn't confirm. They didn't deny. They just let the world wonder. And wonder we did. Because if anything did happen that night, it wasn't just a turning point in their relationship. It was a moment that changed how Michael viewed her and how much deeper he would fall. Years later, in the liner notes of his 1995 album History, Michael referred to Dianna as his mysterious love. Not friend, not mentor, love. But was that love ever returned? As the world kept spinning with platinum records and tabloid headlines, one thing remained unchanged: Michael's obsession. That night in New York didn't quiet the storm inside him. If anything, it made it louder. Because love unspoken is one thing, but love unanswered? That's a wound that never fully closes. And Michael Jackson was about to find out just how deep it could cut. By the mid 1980s, Michael Jackson had conquered the world. But there was still one thing he hadn't won: Dianna Ross's heart. And just when it seemed like that dream was slipping away, something happened that made him believe the impossible was finally within reach. Because Dianna Ross started wearing a ring. His ring. It wasn't just a subtle piece of jewelry. She flaunted it on red carpets, wore it during major appearances. Fans noticed it. Cameras zoomed in, and when Michael looked at her, there was something different in his eyes. Like a man who finally believed the fairy tale was becoming real. But the truth behind the ring? That was where the story turned. Michael truly believed they were engaged. Close friends say he had proposed in private, and Dianna had said yes. He even brought her to meet with his mother, Katherine Jackson, to share the news. But instead of celebrating, Katherine was stunned. She didn't hold back. She told Dianna she was too old for Michael and warned that the relationship could destroy his carefully protected image. And that warning lit the match that would burn it all down. The media got wind of it almost immediately. Within weeks, tabloids were calling Dianna a cradle robber. Headlines painted her as a predator chasing after a vulnerable superstar. The public wasn't ready for their love story, and Dianna knew it. So she ran. Not just from the pressure, from Michael, and from everything they'd quietly built. In a stunning twist, Dianna Ross didn't just back out of the engagement. She married someone else, a businessman named Arnon S. Jr. The wedding blindsided Michael. No warning, no closure, just a headline. And that's when something inside him shattered. Because Michael hadn't just lost a lover, he'd lost his illusion. The dream he had clung to since he was a child was gone, stolen by reality, stolen by fear, stolen by a woman who once wore his ring and kissed him on stage for the world to see. At the 1984 American Music Awards, she'd held his face in her hands, kissed him in front of millions, and let the world believe they were more than friends. Some say it was a test, to see how the public would react. Others believe it was a moment of truth. But if it was real, why didn't she stay? And for Michael, the answer didn't matter anymore. Because now, the betrayal was permanent, and the love that once felt like destiny would soon turn into something much darker. After Diana's sudden marriage to Arnon S. Jr., something inside Michael Jackson shifted. He didn't lash out publicly. He didn't beg her to come back. Instead, he did what he always did with pain. He turned it into music. But this time, the message wasn't subtle. He wrote a song, one that burned with heartbreak, rage, and barely hidden spite. It was called Dirty Dianna. The title alone raised eyebrows. Fans wondered who it was about. The media speculated. Insiders whispered. And Quincy Jones, Michael's longtime producer, panicked because he knew exactly who the song was aimed at. And he wasn't wrong. Quincy begged Michael to change the second verse. It was too personal, too revealing, too risky. If it went out as is, the world would know immediately that this wasn't about some fictional groupie. It was about her. So Michael compromised. He rewrote just enough to create doubt, enough to say it was about fans or tour groupies if he was ever asked. But everyone close to him, they knew the truth. Even Dianna knew. She was furious. She stopped speaking to Michael for weeks. That quiet, unspoken tension between them snapped. The playful teasing and affectionate glances vanished. Because this wasn't just a song, it was an accusation, a musical slap, a message to the woman who had rejected him for another man. But Dianna Ross was never one to let a narrative go unchecked. She responded in the most unexpected way. At her own concerts, Dianna began using Dirty Dianna as her intro music, her way of owning the moment, flipping the script, and laughing at the drama. She even joked about it on stage. It was playful, bold, unbothered. But beneath the surface, everyone knew it still stung, because even though Michael had hidden the harshest lines, the pain in the song was raw, especially in the first and last verses. He sang about a woman who liked the boys in the band, a thinly veiled jab at Diana's relationships with men like Lionel Richie, Barry Gibb, and Gene Simmons. Men who had all been in her life, while she stayed emotionally tied to him. And for Michael, it wasn't just jealousy. It was betrayal layered in years of devotion. He had given her everything, his trust, his love, his loyalty, and still she chose someone else. But the fallout didn't end there. Gene Simmons, who had dated Diana, allegedly had a major falling out with Michael after a private moment where Diana, in the heat of passion, accidentally said Michael's name. The moment was brief, but for Gene, it was the last straw. Their friendship ended on the spot. Even in absence, Diana still had a grip on Michael's world. Because no matter how much he tried to bury those feelings, through fame, through fortune, through songs like Dirty Diana, she always found a way back in. And what came next proved that Michael's pain wasn't just romantic, it was emotional captivity. Even after the heartbreak, the silence, and the revenge songs, Diana Ross never truly let go of Michael Jackson. Not emotionally, not publicly, not even when he tried to move on. And every time he did, she found a way back into his orbit. When Michael went on a publicity date with Madonna, it made headlines instantly. Two global icons stepping out together? It was supposed to be a power move, a way to shake off the heartbreak and show the world he was evolving. But Diana wasn't having it. She reportedly showed up, bold, uninvited, and instead of confronting Michael, she made a scene, sat on his lap, commanded attention. And just like that, the spotlight shifted. Whatever chemistry he was trying to build with Madonna evaporated under Diana's glare. And that was only the beginning. At another high-profile event, Elizabeth Taylor, one of Michael's closest friends, took the stage to comfort him during a rough moment. But before she could finish her gesture, Diana stormed in. She grabbed Michael's arm, physically tried to push Elizabeth aside, and made sure everyone knew she still held claim to him, even if she was married to someone else. At the American Music Awards, Michael arrived with Brooke Shields on his arm, a calculated, elegant statement. But Diana had her own plan. She stood on stage, smiling, blowing kisses at him as if they were the only two people in the room. And when he came up to accept his award, she clung to him, flirted openly. So much so, she forgot her prepared speech entirely. To the public, it seemed playful, harmless. But to those who knew the history, it was anything but. Diana didn't want to marry Michael, but she didn't want anyone else to have him either. And for Michael, the emotional toll was devastating. He was caught in an endless loop, chasing her approval, her affection, her love, and always being met with half-promises and public games. It wasn't love. It wasn't rejection. It was something worse, emotional limbo. He couldn't break free, and she wouldn't let him. Because even as their romantic moments faded, Diana Ross remained the one constant in his emotional universe, hovering above every relationship, every connection, every attempt he made to move forward. And deep down, Michael knew the truth. He wasn't just in love with Diana Ross. He was trapped by her. As the decades passed, the relationship between Michael Jackson and Diana Ross became even harder to define. They weren't lovers, they weren't just friends, and they weren't family. But somehow, they were all of those things. And that ambiguity fueled one of the strangest rumors in pop culture history. A theory began circulating that Diana Ross and Smokey Robinson were actually Michael Jackson's real biological parents. To most, it sounded insane. But in the world of celebrity mythology, where truth, image, and illusion blend seamlessly, people ran with it. And when Smokey Robinson was asked about it, he didn't deny it outright. He laughed. In an interview, he called it hilarious, but admitted to something far more real. Yes, he and Diana Ross had been involved, a full-blown affair that lasted about a year, while he was still married to Claudette Rogers, his bandmate from The Miracles. And while the love triangle never connected to Michael biologically, emotionally, it added yet another layer of confusion to the legacy of Diana Ross. Because Diana wasn't just a muse. She was a mystery, wrapped in scandals, secrets, and detours even she couldn't control. And soon, that chaos began to bleed into her personal life. By the early 2000s, those close to Diana noticed a shift. She wasn't the same tightly composed icon she once was. Friends whispered about her growing reliance on alcohol. Her radiant public image had begun to crack behind closed doors. But when it finally spilled into the headlines, It shocked everyone. In May 2002, Dianna quietly admitted herself into a rehab facility for a 30-day program, a rare act of vulnerability. But 3 weeks in, she left. Not because she was ready, but because she had tour dates to fulfill. The decision was bold and dangerous, because just months later, it all came crashing down. In December 2002, Dianna was pulled over in Tucson, Arizona, driving the wrong way down a one-way street. The police gave her a sobriety test. The results? A blood alcohol level of 0.20, more than double the legal limit. But the part that stunned fans the most, she wasn't even in town for a show. She had been staying at Canyon Ranch, a luxury health resort known for detox, healing, and privacy. And instead of using it as a safe haven, she walked straight into scandal. She pleaded no contest, served 48 hours in jail. And just like that, the woman who once ruled every red carpet with grace and control became a headline for all the wrong reasons. For many, it was a low point. But for Dianna, it was also a wake-up call. Because beneath the sequins and showbiz armor, she was still human, still haunted, still healing from the echoes of relationships, decisions, and emotional wounds that never fully closed. And for Michael Jackson, watching from afar, the woman he had once placed on a pedestal was beginning to fall. But what Dianna did next, on the biggest stage in pop culture, proved she still had the power to turn chaos into spectacle. Long after the applause faded and the scandals piled up, there was still one person Michael Jackson never stopped protecting: Dianna Ross. And when he sat down to draft his final will, a document meant to shape the future of his children, his estate, and his legacy, he made one decision that left even his inner circle stunned. If his mother, Katherine Jackson, could no longer care for his children, he wanted Dianna Ross to raise them. Let that sink in. Not his siblings. Not a family friend. Not even Debbie Rowe, the biological mother of two of his kids. Michael bypassed them all and named the woman who had once rejected his love as the one he trusted most with his children's lives. But why? Because in Michael's mind, Dianna wasn't just a muse. She was a constant, a protector, a mirror of the kind of love he believed they both understood: deep, complex, and unconditional. And he didn't just say it in a will. He proved it when he was most vulnerable. In 1995, while hospitalized and recovering, Michael was preparing for a visit from Dianna, and according to multiple reports, he ordered his then-wife, Lisa Marie Presley, to leave the room immediately. No arguments. No questions. Just get out. Because everything had to be perfect for Dianna. He greeted her with gifts, flowers, affection, like a man welcoming royalty. Not out of romance, but out of reverence. Even in the chaos of his life, she remained untouchable. And that loyalty, etched in ink on his final legal wishes, wasn't just a gesture. It was a legacy. Because when the dust settled and the cameras turned off, and Michael Jackson was no longer here to speak for himself, he left behind one final truth. He didn't just love Dianna Ross. He trusted her more than anyone else in the world, and that decision would echo long after his final breath. In 1981, Dianna Ross made a move that shocked the music world. She walked away from Motown. The very label that built her, that made her a household name, she left it behind. And not quietly. She signed a $20 million deal with RCA Records, the biggest recording contract ever offered to a female artist at the time. But why would she leave the empire she helped build? Because Dianna wanted control, creative freedom, the power to shape her sound without answering to anyone, not even Berry Gordy. And with that pen stroke, she sent a message. She wasn't just a diva, she was a force. The deal gave her complete artistic autonomy, and she used it. New sounds, new styles, a reinvention that predated Madonna's Queen of Reinvention era by years. But while the world applauded her boldness, one man watched with a complicated mix of pride and heartbreak. Because no matter how far she rose, Michael Jackson still saw the woman he once begged to marry. Michael Jackson called her his mother, his lover, his friend. But the truth? Dianna Ross was the one person he could never quite define and never let go of. Their connection wasn't just romantic. It wasn't just platonic. It was something deeper, stranger, more haunting. It shaped the way he loved, the way he performed, the way he suffered. And in the end, even after the betrayals, the silence, the scandals, he still trusted her above all else. He wrote songs about her, built shrines to her, left his children in her name. Because to Michael, Dianna wasn't just part of his story. She was the story. But that leaves us with a question that still echoes long after both of their spotlights faded. Was this love, or was it obsession, devotion, or emotional captivity? Did Diana Ross save Michael Jackson? Or did she quietly break his heart again and again while the world cheered them on? Now we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, was this the greatest untold love story in pop culture history, or a cautionary tale about what happens when fantasy and fame collide? And if this story moved you, shocked you, or made you see these two icons in a whole new light, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because there's always more to the story. And next time, it might be one you thought you already knew.